880 steps a day, the most in the world. Everyone is always on the go, from the morning until late into the night. There's also passionate movement to protect the interests of the underprivileged, people going the distance to help those in need. In a city where change is the only constant, it's not an option to stand still.
This is Asia Now.
It's just after 11 a.m. in Singapore and in Hong Kong, 8:30 in the morning in New Delhi, 10 a.m. in Jakarta. I'm Christine Chan. Millions of people in the Australian state of Victoria will live through another week of lockdown, a strict 7-day circuit breaker for the second most populous state. The authorities there are racing to track the spread of a highly infectious variant strain of the coronavirus. And Tokyo and various other parts of Japan also face the prospect now of an extended state of emergency. Their government leaders are still trying to control the relentless spread of the coronavirus, but medical experts now fear a new variant strain might be spawned from the Summer Olympic Games. And anti-government activists in Hong Kong are back in court today for sentencing. Jimmy Lai and 9 others await their fate on charges they violated the national security law. Nearly 7 million people in Australia's state of Victoria are now in a new lockdown, their 4th since the start of this pandemic. That took effect overnight and will last for a week. The authorities hope this will help them contain a fast-growing cluster of COVID-19 in Melbourne. 4 new cases were reported at the start of this lockdown, bringing the cluster total to 30 in just 5 days. Across Victoria, residents must now remain at home at all times, except for essential work, for grocery shopping, healthcare or exercise, and to get vaccinated. Masks must be worn at all times unless they're at home. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says this coming week will be difficult for those affected.
The next 7 days in Victoria will be very challenging. And of course, we are very mindful of the distress and the difficulty that this will impose upon people right across Victoria as a result of what is being described, rightly I think, by the acting Premier as a circuit-breaking lockdown, and a lockdown for 7 days that hopefully won't go as long as that.
Mr. Morrison had originally said he would ensure that Australia was amongst the leaders in the world when it comes to distributing and administering those vaccine shots. But Australia has not only been slow in its rollout, vaccine hesitancy is rife. Brianna Piazza explains what the authorities are doing now to try and convince more people to get inoculated.
We've heard many times now from our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, that Australia is the envy of the world because it's managed to, for the most part, stamp out COVID-19. In most of the country, really, life has been going on as normal with little or no restrictions at all. So it's really these lockdowns that are happening tend to be not too often, but still very, very much a concern for businesses, particularly here in Melbourne. So pretty much one of the issues that we're running into with the vaccine rollout is hesitancy. So that relates to very much sections of the population that are eligible to be vaccinated. Many people are holding off on getting their vaccinations because of concerns they may have around the safety of the vaccine. So even just in recent days, we heard that the vaccination hubs in Melbourne were pretty much empty, and people who walked past described these as heartbreaking scenes. But that is starting to pick up in recent days. State authorities in Victoria are starting to talk about opening up vaccinations to younger sections of the population. But also recently we've just heard that businesses are getting on board as well. So Australian airline Qantas is considering offering free flights and frequent flyer points to people who have had both vaccinations. It's understood that they're still trying to iron out a few of the finer details, but if that goes ahead, that would be coming into effect sort of towards the next few months and for the rest of the year. So definitely what we understand is that Australia's borders will remain closed until we can get much of the population vaccinated.
Now, Singapore will bar all entry to short-term travellers who may have been to Victoria in the 21 days prior. This rule kicks in here on Sunday. Singapore citizens, permanent residents and long-term pass holders who recently travelled to Victoria State must now serve a 7-day stay-home notice in their residence in Singapore. Swab tests will be done at the start and the end of their isolation period. At the moment, travellers are only required to test negative upon their arrival in Singapore. Travellers from other parts of Australia are not affected by this latest rule. Singapore will monitor and adjust their border measures to manage the situation with COVID-19. Now, extending the state of emergency and tightening quarantine measures in Japan. They're pulling out all the stops. It's 2 months ahead of the scheduled start of the Tokyo Olympics, and there are growing calls that they, in fact, cancel those games. A senior government official said the government plans to extend the state of emergency for COVID-19 by nearly a month over Tokyo and 8 other prefectures. This state of emergency is due to expire on May the 31st. Now it might be extended until June the 20th. The games are due to begin a month after that, from July the 23rd. A formal decision on any extension might be taken after the Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga consults with a panel of experts today. Yesterday, though, Japan recorded more than 4,100 new infections and 111 additional deaths. They have struggled to control the spread of a highly infectious new strain of the variants. Now, from today, those arriving from India and several other countries must self-isolate at government-designated facilities for 10 days. The head of Japan's doctors' union has warned the authorities cannot deny the possibility of a new strain of COVID-19 emerging within the country if the Olympics are held in July.
コロナとの戦いに勝利するためには、このような動きを止める必要があります。そのために私たちは東京オリンピックの中止を求めました。
Health experts in the United States had recently said plans to hold the Olympics in Tokyo were not informed by the best scientific evidence. They've called for urgent assessment of those health risks associated with the Games opening as planned and for additional measures to help mitigate those risks. But not everyone is against the event. The European Union has backed Japan's decision to hold these Games, saying it'll be a symbol of global unity. There have been some hits and some misses as Taiwan seeks to procure more vaccines for its inoculation campaign. The island is expecting to receive its first shipment of 150,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine today. There are 5 million shots, though, that they did order. And local media has reported a Japanese lawmaker is recommending the government share its national supply of AstraZeneca vaccines with Taiwan. Now, Taiwan's foreign ministry has declined to comment, but they say they're working very hard to obtain vaccines. A vaccine deal with Pfizer-BioNTech collapsed over the use of country in their agreement with Taiwan. And health officials in Taiwan say a final contract was, in fact, signed, but hours later, the German drug maker strongly recommended that word be changed in the Chinese version of their press release. Now, once the government agreed to tweak it to Taiwan, BioNTech then delayed their agreement by a week, owing to a re-evaluation, they say, of the global vaccine supply and the readjusted timelines. The sudden spike in domestic infections, though, in Taiwan placed an increasing strain on their healthcare system, especially with only 1% of its population of 23 million now vaccinated. The media tycoon in Hong Kong, Jimmy Lai, together with 9 other anti-government activists, are due to be sentenced today for participating in a illegal assembly in 2019. All of them face the maximum sentence of 5 years in jail under the Public Order Ordinance. Lai is the founder of Apple Daily, the local publication, and he's currently serving a 14-month sentence for having taken part in unauthorized assemblies in August of 2019. He faces 3 charges under the new national security law that was introduced by Beijing last year in response to those protests in Hong Kong in 2019. Now, the authorities in Hong Kong are also taking more steps now to crack down on Jimmy Lai, as Roland Lim explains.
Lai and former lawmakers Lee Chok-yan, Albert Ho and Leong Kok Hong had earlier pleaded guilty to organizing an illegal assembly on October 1st, 2019. China's National Day, during the height of the civil unrest that year. They had led a protest march from Causeway Bay to Central without